Hi guys, over the past couple weeks we've been looking at the human body and the organ systems that make it up. We've discussed all 11 organ systems at least in a little bit of detail, but now we're going to go in a little bit more in depth on some specific specialized organ systems. So remember, these organ systems, they're basically working together to keep you alive, and they do that through homeostasis. They try to maintain this internal set of conditions in the body. This particular set of slides will be about the digestive system and its role in maintaining homeostasis in the human body. So as we look at the digestive system, we're going to focus on a specific question that's required for the body to keep itself going and maintain homeostasis, and that is, how does the body obtain and use nutrients and oxygen? There's three major organ systems that play a role in this process of obtaining and using nutrients and oxygen. These are the digestive system, the respiratory system, and the circulatory system. The digestive system, which is the focus of this set of slides, breaks food down into a form of energy that cells can use. Glucose, right? The respiratory system is also involved here, and it brings oxygen into the body through the lungs, where it diffuses into the circulatory system. And the circulatory system, it's kind of like the delivery system of the body. It's going to absorb glucose from the small intestine, and it's going to transport both glucose from the digestive system and oxygen from the respiratory system to all the cells of the body. So this brings us to the question of, why do cells need glucose and oxygen in the first place? Why is it so important to deliver these specific nutrients to cells? And if you can recall back to when we talked about cells, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the cell processes we learned about, it has to do with cellular respiration, right? As aerobic organisms, the human body and humans need oxygen in order to go through cellular respiration, in order to make enough energy that cells can use. So glucose is a form of chemical energy, but ATP is a form of chemical energy that cells can actually use to perform their functions. Next up, we'll look at some of the functions of the digestive system, and there are several. So the primary function is to break down food into a usable form. So it's essentially, the digestive system as a whole, it's essentially one long tube that uses both physical and chemical methods to break food down into increasingly smaller fragments. This tube that goes from one end all the way to the other is known as the alimentary canal. So once food is completely broken down, the monomers that it's broken down into are absorbed by the body along with excess water. And finally, the indigestible material and any other waste products, including things like dead blood cells and other solid waste, is released from the body as feces, or eliminated, we might say, as feces. Okay, so we're going to move down through the alimentary canal. We're going to kind of go through the different organs of the digestive system and follow the path that your food would take as it goes in through your mouth and eventually out through your anus. So it starts with the mouth, which is going to break food down chemically with saliva. There's enzymes in saliva that can help break down food. And also mechanically. Your teeth themselves, they grind up food. They break it down into smaller pieces, which is going to aid in digestion, as we'll see. The pharynx, which is your throat essentially, it can send things towards your lungs through your trachea, but in the case of the digestive system, it's going to send things down the esophagus, right? It's going to send this chewed up food down the esophagus. And the esophagus is going to contract food down to the stomach through a process called peristalsis. So the esophagus is the tube that goes from the mouth to the stomach, and normally something called peristalsis will be smooth muscle contractions that push food down. We'll look a little bit more at smooth muscle and peristalsis. So peristalsis is the wave-like contraction of smooth muscle tissue around the esophagus. It's completely involuntary, but essential for digestion. So it moves the swallowed food, and you can see that in the diagram to the right. It moves the swallowed food, or bolus. That's what it's not really food anymore once it's all chewed up and mashed up. So it moves the bolus through the esophagus and into the stomach. So these muscles kind of come as waves, and they slowly push things down. And so it's not just gravity. It's not like you eat something and it just falls into your stomach. It actually moves through the esophagus through the process of peristalsis. This is why you can still eat and swallow things while you're hanging upside down. So if you're hanging off the edge of your bed watching TV, you'll notice that, hey, you can still eat popcorn and it moves right down your throat, right down your esophagus to your stomach like normal. It won't just, when you hang upside down, all your insides don't fall out of your stomach. Okay, so our next stop after it goes through our esophagus is the stomach. Now the stomach is highly acidic and breaks food down into chyme. It's kind of like a liquid version of what you ate earlier. So the stomach lining is covered in indentations called gastric pits. And specialized cells, and you can see it in that bottom diagram, specialized cells in the gastric pits release hydrochloric acid, which is a pretty strong acid. Your stomach has a pH of between 1 and 2. And these gastric pits also release digestive enzymes such as pepsin. And there's some other ones too, but these are enzymes that are going to help with digestion as food continues to move through the digestive system. The acidic conditions in the stomach help break down food into chyme before it moves into the small intestines. So that's our next stop. So after things have been in the stomach for a while and have dissolved in the acid as much as it can, it's going to push out through the sphincter, which is a little muscular circle that separates different organs in the digestive system, into the small intestine. The small intestine is where most of the absorption of nutrients occurs. So the small intestine digests food into monomers, and then that food is eventually absorbed into the circulatory system. So there's these little things called villi in there, and they're full of blood vessels, and that is how it gets into the blood and into all the places of the body it needs to eventually be. So the small intestinal lining has many tiny little folds. Even though it might look smooth or even just like it kind of has ribs in it, each of those ribs is covered in these things called villis, or a single one would be a villus. And it really amps up the surface area inside of the small intestine. So the villi greatly increases the surface area, and the more surface area, the more space that it can absorb nutrients and get them into the capillaries, which are the tiny blood vessels that move things into the circulatory system. So one thing I want to mention in this process of the small intestines is something called accessory organs. So there are several organs in the digestive system that food doesn't actually move through. They're connected to the small intestine, and these organs are going to release chemicals and enzymes and hormones into the small intestine to help with digestion. So as I said before, food does not directly move through these organs. Therefore, they're just known as accessory organs. They're not part of the alimentary canal, but they are essential in digestion. So one of them is the liver, which makes bile, and bile is stored in the gallbladder. The gallbladder then releases the bile into the intestines, and the bile has a higher pH, and it's also very good at breaking down fats. The pancreas is another accessory organ, and it secretes many different digestive enzymes, as well as enzymes that are going to help neutralize the pH, right? So we just had that acidic chyme come out of the stomach and pour into the small intestine, and the pancreas is going to help neutralize that. So different enzymes are released here, some to help break down proteins, some help break down fats. So we can, the small intestine needs these to be broken down to their monomers if it's going to have any chance to absorb them into the bloodstream. Okay, so our next stop in the alimentary canal, well, it's not really a stop, but I guess we're still in the small intestine, but as things absorb into the small intestines, they're going to move into the circulatory system, into the blood, and the blood's going to go to the liver for processing. So it's going to sort out what's good and what's not before it gets spread in your bloodstream to all the different organs of your body. So most of the absorptions pretty much all occur at this point in the small intestines. Once it's leaving the small intestine, it's pretty much just looking for an exit, so to speak. So the large intestine, or the colon, is the final kind of path to getting out of the body, and it's going to absorb all the remaining liquids. So at this point, it's still a liquidy. Remember, we said the chyme is a liquid when it leaves the stomach, and it's still pretty liquidy as it moves through the small intestine. As it gets into the large intestine is going to soak in, take all that water, all that liquid in it, back into the body, and it will slowly make what's left of what had been digested into a more solid state. And this solid mass is going to be essentially feces. It's what you're going to get rid of. It's what you're going to dispose of as a waste. So the rectum is the second to last stop, and it's going to hold the solid waste until you go to the bathroom. The final exit of your body is your anus, and that's when it's actually going to leave, and it has no purpose left for your body. So that's the alimentary canal, all the way from the mouth through the esophagus to the stomach, to the small intestine, to the large intestine, and to the rectum and to the anus. So brief summary of what we talked about here today, the kind of main structures and functions of the digestive system. The digestive system is essential for gathering the nutrients needed to keep cells functioning, right? So without a source of glucose, cellular respiration could not occur and cells would not have the energy they need to function. Food moves through several organs that together make up the alimentary canal. And we can't forget about our accessory organs of the digestive system. They're just as important, and they aid in digestion by secreting chemicals and enzymes to aid in the metabolism of food. So if you need to pause or rewind or go back to fill in some parts of your notes, make sure you do that. But that's it for the digestive system. That's kind of what you need to know, what it does, what the parts are. So that's it, guys.